For what you saw, I did not wish for any of you to see, until I had helped him to heal.
Beginning his scheme to seize Middle-earth in The Lord of the Rings. The Rings of Power Season 2, Sauron is not really getting anything done with all this wooing. Rather than the more well-known Third Age, in which Frodo's adventure is set, the Prime Video series has approached Tolkien's novels by bringing the Second Age to the screen. This means a chance to demonstrate Sauron's ascent to Dark Lord status utilizing his Rings of Power, but as Tolkien omitted many particular details in this regard, there is much to be filled in here. Rings of Power has brought some unexpected shocks as it is. The Dark Lord sets his sights on the 9 meant for men after Sauron and Celebrimbor successfully make the 7 Dwarven Rings in Season 2, Episode 5. But this is when the Eregion Forge starts to see things spiraling out of hand. Celebrimbor wanted not to make the 9, which infuriated Sauron, Anatar. He had to follow his plans exactly and pull all the stops to control the smiths to do his bidding once more, including some firm flirting with Mirdania. After Galadriel in Season 1, Sauron flirts with Mirdania in the Rings of Power Season 2. Anatar deliberately twisted a few things to imply that the elves add additional mithril to their attempts at building the rings. Hoping to persuade Celebrimbor back to working on the 9, Celebrimbor couldn't stand to see them screw things all about. Hence the turmoil that ensued achieved the intended result. But in the attempt, Mirdania ended up with one of the rings on her finger and observed Anatar as he really was, a wicked entity who teemed of death. In Rings of Power Season 1, he seduced Galadriel with smoldering glances and heart-to-hearts as Halbrand, essentially doing the same thing. Naturally, Sauron cranked on the charm to persuade Mirdania that what she saw was Celebrimbor's anguished essence, as he couldn't let her realize that the being she saw was him. He laid it really thick as well, telling her she looked much like the beautiful Lady Galadriel in some lights. Sauron preyed on her vanity as well as her sympathy. Naturally, Sauron had tried this kind of strategy before. In Rings of Power Season 1, he essentially followed the same pattern when he seduced Galadriel with hearts and scorching looks as Halbrand. Are Sauron's emotions for Galadriel and Mirdania real? One should not confuse flirtation by Sauron with actual love. Mirdania is particularly someone he would find completely undeserving of his attention, in his perspective. Galadriel, on the other hand, is another tale entirely. Even though he isn't in the conventional sense in love with her. When Galadriel reported feeling a particular emotion while he battled by her side, Sauron was probably sincere since he understands her might. She would empower his own control over the hearts and minds of Middle-earth, so he really wants her to be his queen in Rings of Power. Galadriel always will be tempted by this as well. When Sauron remarked that Mirdania resembled Galadriel, he may have been sincere. She is the only one who seems to understand something is quite wrong at the Forge. Sauron might also like her intelligence. Still, his primary aim is to win her love and confidence so he may control her more easily. This might, however, turn backfiring. Though Sauron has many puppets serving his will, even a strong being like him will run out of hands to control. His flirtation with Mirdania shows the Dark Lord's constantly mounting desperation. Sauron from the Rings of Power is like a sulking child, and Celebrimbor's parent. Sauron finds less ability to keep himself together the more annoyed Celebrimbor grows in Rings of Power Season 2. Celebrimbor's non-cooperation causes his mask as Anatar, the Lord of Gifts, to slip. Sauron eventually goes so far as to say he will simply make the 9 all by himself before leaving the room like a spoilt child. Knowing he couldn't resist seizing control if Anatar and the Smiths were performing a poor job, he next turned to the traditional approach of weaponized incompetence to have Celebrimbor back on board.